Hi everyone, it's Rose Parker, and today we have another guest on the podcast, the one and only Cecilia McGough, founder of Students with Psychosis. Now, you all might be familiar with Students with Psychosis, either from your own involvement with its prominence in the psychosis community, or from my page. You might know that I currently serve on the executive board as Students with Psychosis as of this podcast, but I don't know how much you know about Cecilia. Cecilia has a very interesting life story when it comes to her founding Students with Psychosis. She's gone through a lot, and she and I also have a very close friendship, and I'd love for you to just get to know her more and this organization that means so much to me. So, Cecilia, would you like to get us started?
Yes. I want to first say thank you so much, Rose, for having me on. And you're such a dear friend and also such a powerhouse advocate within the psychosis community. I just have the largest respect for you.
Thank you, Cecilia. And likewise, I so admire what you do, and I'm so proud to call you my friend and to work for you.
Well, right back at you.
So let's get a bit at the beginning. Can you tell us a bit about your journey with psychosis, how you learned you had psychosis, and what got you started in all of this?
Yeah, so it's been thought of that I've had psychosis symptoms for as long as I can remember. When I was younger, I used to see shadowy figures. One in particular that would like come out of my closet, and my parents would call it Mr. Blob Man. I honestly think that they thought that I just had an overactive imagination. I mean, to be quite honest, what 5-year-old isn't scared of their bedroom closet? But my symptoms progressed as I got older, started having more of staticky whispers in my ears, and then the hallucinations that were shadowy figures ended up morphing more into much more vivid hallucinations. And during my junior and senior year of high school, I started seeing some of my more recurring hallucinations, such as a clown that very much resembles the older adaptation of Stephen King's It, spiders, ghost-like girl, and some other reoccurring hallucinations as well. And these hallucinations got worse and really snowballed into college. Unfortunately, I didn't receive any treatment until 8 months after a suicide attempt my freshman year at college. And partially because why I didn't receive treatment was because of stigma, both internal stigma and also pushback that I received from my family members. I remember talking to my mom's saying that don't tell anyone about your hallucinations, what you're experiencing, because people are going to think that you're crazy, people are going to think that you're dangerous, and you won't be able to get a job. So my message to that now is that if anyone listening to this podcast and you're debating whether or not to get treatment because of the stigma, I just want to say that it is your choice and it is also your right. Don't let anyone, including yourself, get in the way of getting that proper medical treatment. And it was from this experience of having psychosis and struggling, I realized that a lot of individuals, my fellow peers, were falling through the cracks at the university. And this very much bothered me. And however, I wasn't yet open about my psychosis until my second hospital stay because the police were involved. I'll set up the scene a little bit. The night before, I was struggling with my psychosis symptoms. I checked myself into the ER. I stayed there overnight. All was good. The doctor said I was okay to go back to my dorm room. But when I returned back to my dorm room, I was not only greeted by my 3 roommates, but also the RA and a can help person. And we all talked and decided that I needed another psych ward stay, and I was in no way go, and I have no past history of violence. Actually, I lived in a domestic abuse shelter for part of high school, and so I was in no way refusing to go, and I wasn't a threat. But they found it necessary to call the police, and they brought in police officers in full uniform into my dorm room. They patted me down and escorted me into a marked police car in front of a dining commons, and then I was gone for 10 days. And when I got back, the cat was out of the bag. And that's when I wanted to make sure to set the story straight. And I started my advocacy. And from that, then I also started the nonprofit Students with Psychosis.
Well, that's a really powerful story you share about how the stigma against psychosis and how we are often treated like criminals and like we are perpetrators when in fact we are medical patients. We are people suffering from an organic brain condition, and instead of being treated like people with an illness, we are treated like deviants and people that must be controlled. And your story really hits me. Personally, when I have had psychotic episodes, I have been escorted to the hospital by police, but never in such a public, demeaning manner. And honestly, that is just so incredibly appalling. And I'm so sorry that that happened to you, but I am glad that you had that resiliency factor and you took it as a step to make change and to move forward so it wouldn't happen to another person. And isn't that why we do all of this anyway? So, and that's one thing I love about you. You take the negatives and you turn them into ways to protect other people and prevent harm from happening to other people in the future. That I hold a similar attitude, at least I try to, and I think that's one reason we get along so well. We both have this fighting attitude, and I hope it's one thing we can build in this community that we need to push forward. We need to change it for the future. It's not enough to just say things are wrong. We need to actually change how things are handled.
I cannot agree with you more, and echoing what you said, that we need to help create change on how people with psychosis are treated when they're in a mental health crisis, and also how they're treated in general as well. I know as someone with psychosis, oftentimes my valid fears are dismissed as paranoia, and then my also valid ambitions are often dismissed as like delusions of grandeur and such. I remember in college when I was making the shift with my career trajectory. I was a radio astronomer for 7 years, and after this incident with the police, I decided to go more the direction of mental health advocacy and starting a nonprofit. And I remember talking with my mental health care provider at the time, and when I spoke about my ambitions of moving to New York City, founding a nonprofit, those were very much dismissed as like a delusion of grandeur. And let me just say, I do kind of understand, if someone, expresses like giving up their career and moving to New York City, that does maybe sound, like an extreme move or something, but people with psychosis can dream big, and I think that we very much as a society need to rethink how we see people living with psychosis and the things that they can accomplish in their life.
For me, I was working in molecular biology, and I was basically told you're never going to graduate college, you're going to end up in an institution, or you're going to die. And, you know, I didn't end up being a molecular biologist, but look what's happened. And I proved all of them wrong, and it feels so good. And I really get what you're saying, because we're either dismissed as delusional, or we're told we'll end up in a hospital for the rest of our lives. And there's just no hope surrounding people with psychosis in the general cultural narrative. And we need to change that, because we have so few role models like ourselves, and it's just, we're not hopeless, and our ambitions are not delusions. It is possible for people with psychosis to live happy, fulfilling lives. Most of the obstacles are cultural and institutional, and those can be changed.
I cannot agree more. A lot of the obstacles being created by society, like what you have said, and to be very honest, when it comes to creating workplace environments, school environments, social environments that are mental health friendly and neurodivergent, everyone wins, whether or not you have a mental health condition or not. It's we really need to be moving more towards that direction to be more accommodating, more accessible to people in general, and this would very much help empower people living with psychosis.
Agreed. Agreed. Just a more accommodating environment in general will help everyone. I remember when I was reading articles for my article on students with psychosis in higher education, the one that's available on my blog and is getting published in short form. Having a mental health or 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 neurodivergence is a bigger factor in not graduating college than being first generation, racial minority, or low socioeconomic status. You're more likely not to graduate if you have a mental health issue than any of those factors. And in some studies, a cohort study, no one with early onset schizophrenia achieved a tertiary degree. And this was a huge cohort study in Finland of the late 20th century. So it just shows how many obstacles there are. But there are people who do make it. There's Ellen Sachs. There's Mr. O'Grady, who I interviewed on my last interview podcast. And I graduated college. It is possible, but the problem is the institutions. And we have students here and students with psychosis who are willing to study, who want to study, who want tertiary degrees, who want graduate degrees, who want PhDs and MDs and things like that. But we have to let them.
I cannot agree more, and also when it comes to like the importance of having organizations like Students with Psychosis, just adding on to your point, there are so many additional barriers for people living with psychosis in when working towards a academic degree. And when it comes to students with psychosis, that's something that I'm very proud of the work that we do. We offer over 28 hours worth of virtual programming for our students every single week. And even during COVID, actually, when it came to our outreach, we ended up expanding so much because we had to meet the demand of students abruptly leaving their universities and the increased need of mental health care. I remember before COVID, we had just started accepting students outside of Penn State. We started out as a little club at Penn State called Students with Schizophrenia. Then we rebranded to Students with Psychosis in January of 2020 to be more inclusive. And then COVID happened in March 2020, and by April, our student leader uh, program had grown by 20%, and now we're in over 31 countries around the world. And something that I think is so important and powerful with our organization, Students with Psychosis,